Herr Flyg på snålskjuts åker med Per Albin igen. Men han av oss får klart besked, Per Albin igen. Farväl, farväl till Nisse i höst. Per Albin ska få min röst. Herr Lindholm ritar hakkors för Per Albin igen. Dess högre sjunger vi i kör Per Albin igen. Farväl, farväl till nazis i höst. Per Albin ska få min röst. Farväl, farväl till nazis i höst. Per Albin ska få min röst.
Goddagens mina damer och herrar och välkommen tillbaka. Hello ladies and gentlemen and welcome back. So this video has been way too long for me to make. It's been so much information, so much other things I've been doing. So I just want to get this video done. So the reason for this video is a bit iffy, I should say myself. So it all started with me getting a book about Nils Flyg, and someone asked me to actually do a video about Nils Flyg. The book is Gåtan, Nils Flyg och nazismen, which is pretty much just the story of Nils Flyg. Interesting book, not the type of book I like to read personally, but is what it is. While reading it, it's like, yeah, here's a lot of interesting points, but he's not that interesting. Yeah, he's interesting, yes, but he's not interesting to have a video on in and of itself. Like, you know, he's not a funny, goofy guy, he's just, he's what he is. But reading more into him and sort of like thinking about the era he comes from, it actually gets me two different sort of points of views that I want to talk about more, using Nils Flyg as sort of a basis to do that. And these 2 points I want to talk about more is sort of Swedish dualistic political history, how there's only two sides. And this is actually something brought up by Lindholm in his later years. This is the Nazi in the beginning, how he talks about the politics of Sweden, well, throughout its entire democratic history. Because Lindholm went from Nazi to commie. It's really funny, and then Flyg went from commie to Nazi. Goofy guys all around. So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about sort of the modern national Bolshevistic, sort of Norse Bolshevistic paprika nationalism that is going on right now, and why Nils Flyg is sort of seen as a person of interest there, which is quite fascinating. Before we go into that, I do want to talk about who is Nils Flyg. Well, there's quite a lot to this man. He embodied the socialism of Sweden during late 1900s, sort of like 1910s, like the early democratic era of Sweden. He was the go-to socialist in many ways. It's like dude was everywhere. It's like International, he was there. I think he met Rosa Luxemburg and the rest. So he was like active, and it wasn't just active in the sense that he was a bit autistic in the background. No. The dude was a woman's man. Everybody wanted a piece of that Flyg ass, if you know what I mean. So he was very prominent. He was born into this culture, born into lead, and he did that. He led the then Communistic Party of Sweden, which is today's left-wing party, which is really, really funny. Because he was kind of built to do that. Like, his entire history was to do that. Throughout that journey, that little piece of, just a tiny bit of voice in the back of his head started to crawl and started to nag on him. It's like, why was that voice there? Well, simple, actually. Bolshevism. He hated Bolshevism. So now, why did he hate Bolshevism? Well, simple. While he was socialistic, while he was communist, now Sweden should be run by workers and all, he still believed it was Swedish people who should run these communes, these these worker unions. So when the Communist Party started to dabble more with the Russians, and especially during Lenin's death, things started to go wrong. He wrote an introductory part for a book where Stalin, Trotsky, and Bukharin also had written in. And because he did it, and because, Trotsky, sort of like it was removed, and Nils got a lot of shit for having a positive view on Trotsky, which was not allowed. More or less the entirety of the Swedish Communist Party during the time were influenced by Stalin. And it's something he hated, and especially the imperialism of Stalin. How many of the communists wanted Stalin to take over Sweden themselves, and he's like, yeah, that doesn't benefit the Swedish worker. So throughout his time, he had that focus on Sweden, and he, especially when the Nazis came along and kind of had a push against anti-Bolshevism, he started to enjoy that sentiment. And the more he started to enjoy it, the more he started to read, the more interest he got into National Socialism. So after some time, after some infighting with a person, he decided to split off and create his own party. And then later on, that party more or less became National Socialistic. So started with a simple disagreement, as everything does with communists, but it was mostly about Bolshevism. Bolshevism, imperialism, and him just getting the shaft because he doesn't give Stalin all his grace and glory.
Fascister och opportunister bör behandlas som fläsk. Till slakthuset ska de skickas med enkel biljett. Så rätt, för man måste knäcka ägg för att få omelett.
Throughout his change towards a more German-focused idea, Nils was always afraid of Soviet spies, because there was quite a lot of them in Sweden during the time. And in 1942, he allegedly killed himself in his own home. But there is probably a chance of that being a Soviet spy killing him. Yeah. This focus on Bolshevism and Stalin didn't leave the Communist Party until a while later. Alright, so I didn't want to make a biography, but I made a biography. Ooh, shockers. But alright, let's talk about the 2 points I actually wanted to talk about. One being sort of the Swedish history of these only two sides. What we learn a bit from Nils is that you're either one or the other. There's always this dualism here. But he has a dualism of the extremes, which is a bit fascinating. But what I understand from Lindholm, he stated in his wanting of a National Socialistic Party in Sweden, he stated, well, you have to be either one or the other. He stated, if you're National Socialist, you're either sort of a worker, sosse, a socialist, so it's like social democrat, part of like the worker concepts, or you are borgare, as it's called in Sweden, which is like the city folk. This is more the merchant class. So you're either one or the other. There's like this two sides. So Swedish politics, pretty much ever since quite a while back, have had that symbolized in the two party systems we did have. Yes, we have multiple parties, but it's block parties. So you still vote, for one of the two. And even till this day, the bloc is dead, by the way. Bloc died last election, but it's still there. You're either one or the other. So a lot of day when new parties come along, they have conundrums like, are you either one or the other? Nils didn't go, he wasn't extreme, he didn't start extreme, and even his communistic views in Sweden during time wasn't the most extremist, but he just was part of the right bubble, not the left bubble. So, but when he went over to the right bubble, because he's not used to that culture, he became a radical. So it's sort of like, and same thing goes with Lindholm, because he's in the right bubble, and going to the left bubble, he's outskirted and he creates like an extreme. But still within these bubbles, you cannot create a party, you cannot have politics in Sweden without being one or the other. There is no such thing as pure communist or pure national socialist in Sweden. There's never been. There is no party that is there. And the point of the Centre Party, well, what's the point of the Centre Party, was to be in between this sort of group, the third alternative in sorts of way in early Swedish politics. But even that one was deemed either on the left bubble or the right bubble, even though they swapped over time. They're not consistent. So it's only these two big bubbles, and these bubbles have never bursted. Yes, they were supposed to burst last election, but no. The culture of the bubbles are still there. So throughout entire Swedish politics, is you either one or the other. Again, there's no third alternative. And this has created sort of the conflicts we are in today, and sort of like how we are, because it's only two parties of sorts, the two bubbles, nepotism, and the rest grows in there. And so when the new sort of politics brings in trying to mix, it becomes odd, because, for example, what a lot of left-wingers today define as Nazis, Swedish Democrats, or even people that are nationalistic, they're not on the right bubble, they're on the left bubble. They've always been on the left bubble. But they're nationalistic, but because the bubble sort of internally changing around, it's trying to go over to the right side. But the people have to leave to the right side. But leaving to the right side creates sort of an extreme, because you can't swap bubbles without going to an extreme. Sadly, it doesn't work that way. So this new sort of paprika nationalism that's coming up now, national Bolshevism, or Nordic Bolshevism, as some people are defining it, these are all people in the left. But the left ostracize these people. They say that you're a Nazi or, a racist, the rest of it. Sure, they are. They are racist, they are. But they're in the left bubble. So what do? Well, they try to now revive some sort of a culture. This is when Nils Flyg is important, revive sort of a culture of the left that has been there before. That's why they focus on Per Albin Hansson, Tage Erlander, sort of the old social democratic norms they want to try to bring in again, but it's not working. And they just get pushed to the right side more and more. And a lot of the nationalists are turning into capitalists, which makes no sense either, because they go into the right side. So it's like, again, are you a nationalist? No, you're not a nationalist. You're either nationalist on the left, nationalist on the right. Those things go first. Either the left bubble or the right bubble. And this is not like left and right dichotomy. It's again, a farmer or boyar, sosse, boyar. And you have to be in one of them. You cannot be outside of them. It's impossible to be outside of them. And that brings conflict for me as well. I don't want to be in any of these bubbles, but immediately when you go into politics, you're in this bubble. So just to summarize a tiny bit here, the idea of people first is sort of both what Nils had and what Lindholm had. But if you want to create that, you still have to be within these two bubbles. And if you're not within these two bubbles, then it's not going to work. Like Lindholm explained, for example, very early on in his party, is pretty much, your members are going to choose either or. You might try to be above it. You might be the exceptional charismatic man, but so your members matter. And the members will choose either or. And once they've chosen, there will be conflict between the two bubbles, and then they're hell. So to end it off, what future does paprika nationalism have in Sweden? Well, I mean, funny memes, one thing. I appreciate that. But there's not much in future there, because you got to pick a side. You are, in many ways, a more radical sort of Swedish democratic force, even though I know most of them hates them, because, you got to pick a side. And Swedish Democrats today have picked the right bubble, while most of the paprika nationalism guys are on the left bubble. So, and there will be attempt from the Communist Party and probably the Left Party to constantly do split, but they have always done that and it won't lead anywhere. Like there is a quote-unquote a new national Bolshevistic party now in Sweden. It's alright, I mean, alright. Make me swallow my laughter in the future, but nothing is gonna come from it, I'm sorry. It's fun meme. But anyways, let's not end in pessimism. Let's end in what changes can one do for Sweden then, if you want some changes. Well, your bubble won't care for you. That's one thing to remember. Alright, I was thinking of something clever to say, but from what I can understand about Swedish politics, it's the bubbles are very nepotistic. They're not going to change, and they're not going to give up power. What usually creates change is an external, not external threat, but an external sort of force that changes politics here in Sweden. Like, if you take for the left bubble, like Stalin back in the day, and then some other, like Soviet Union and the East Bloc also have influenced that quite a lot. And for the right, it was like the neoliberal Thatcher and Reagan influenced them quite a lot. So it's sort of adapt philosophies from a bit outside of the main bubbles. Sort of outside forces, but not within Sweden itself, but try to adapt it and see how it can have it visual for them, have it visualized. Then maybe something can happen. But we'll see. But yeah, we'll see. Good luck. And for any Expo people out there, I don't condone any of this shit. I guess this is just for education. You know, I'm a Greenland nationalist. I believe in the Greenland should rule the world. That's about it. Take care now, and talk to you another day.